In recent weeks, there have been many reports of teenagers committing suicide. Also, children as young as 6 years old have actually taken their own lives. This, of course, is tragic for us to see children who still have their whole future before them take their own lives because they are unable to deal with the problems in their lives. Last week was Teen Suicide Prevention Week, but nevertheless, we're going to try to tackle this topic with Leanne Lurie, who is a clinical psychologist specializing in teens and children, and she's also affiliated with the South African Depression and Anxiety Group. Good morning to you, Leanne. Thank you so much for coming through.
Good morning. Thank you for having me.
This is quite an important discussion. It's very heartbreaking as well because we would not think we'd be sitting here this morning and discussing a 6-year-old that's taken their own lives.
No, definitely not. You know, childhood is typically described as a period of innocence where a child's able to be carefree, to play, you know, without having the burden of the world on their shoulders. And yet we are starting to see a rise in incidences where you have a child as young as 6 also engaging in either self-harm or ultimately a completed act of suicide.
But why would it happen? Why would a child go that route?
So we may never have the exact answers as to what happened to this particular child or to children in a similar position. We need to ask, was there a pre-existing history of anxiety or depression? Was the child exposed to something untoward that the family or caregivers may not have even been aware of? What was going on in the general context? I think we also have to remember that young children often lack the same emotional and verbal capacity as adults do or as teenagers do to actually express what's going on internally. And for that particular child, it may have felt that the world was completely dark and that there was no other option. But of course, it's absolutely devastating.
It is indeed. And one would imagine it might also have something to do with perhaps adjustment at school, because a 6-year-old, I would imagine, has just started school.
Look, I think that there may be like many factors. I think that for the family left behind, you know, you're looking for something tangible to hold on to one particular reason, to almost explain something that you cannot rationalize, that you cannot justify. Sure, the adjustment, let's say, from a nursery school environment to a school environment is huge and may generate a significant amount of anxiety within the child that they may not be able to express.
And there's something that we don't often talk about, that's bullying at schools.
Yes. Yeah.
Maybe a contributing factor as well.
I think it's definitely a contributing factor. I think it's something that's receiving a lot more attention. Parents are not, and caregivers are not present on the field during breaks. They're also not present in the online environments that are frequented by children and adolescents. And I think we also need to remember that children and adolescents carry a significant amount of shame around bullying. They believe, you know, there must be something wrong with them, that they're being subjected to this kind of act, and very often they conceal the fact from their parents because they're scared they're going to be judged or they're going to be blamed.
Who do we blame in such instances? Do we blame ourselves as parents because at times we're too busy for our children? Financial pressures that are there, you know, trying to make it up for them, and you're not able to spend time and get to understand and know what's happening in your child's life.
I think it's not useful to point blame at one particular system. I think we have to look at the problem as a systemic issue as a whole. You know, a child and a teenager is part of like many different systems. A family system, a caregiver system, a school system, you know, whatever other clubs and that they are part of. I think we have to remember that childhood and adolescence is becoming a far more complex time. And yes, sure, the financial pressures and work pressures and family pressures may be greater. But I think that very often parents naturally assume that they have an open relationship with their children. And so they believe that their children will come to them with any difficulties they may be facing. But very often this doesn't happen. And it doesn't mean that the parents are necessarily to blame. We also have to remember that an adolescent, for example, that is serious about inflicting harm or about taking their lives may not actually discuss the issue with their parents.
They would rather discuss it with their friends.
Yes, because almost there it's seen as sort of as socially acceptable. Very often parents and caregivers, you know, may view an act of self-harm or attempted self-harm as manipulative or as attention-seeking, not actually realizing the severity of what's going on underneath.
Sure. And I know as a result, the South African Depression and Anxiety Group will be conducting a campaign that's called Suicide Should Not Be a Secret. Talk to us about this, because you're targeting schools.
Yes. So the campaign has been in existence for a very long time, and it aims to demystify this stigma, this belief that if you talk about suicide, you're planting ideas in a child or adolescent's head. But we need to talk about these issues. We need to create a safe and non-judgmental space in which children and adolescents can ask these difficult questions and empower them to have courageous conversations with their parents when they are struggling, when they are in trouble, in order to prevent something so tragic from occurring.
All right, Leanne, we'll leave it at that for now. Thank you so much for coming through, and hopefully the parents should contact the South African Depression and Anxiety Group for more help.
Yes.
All right, thank you so much. Well, there you have it, talking to us this morning about depression, of course, and suicide in teens is Leanne Lurie, who is clinical psychologist specializing in teens and children, talking to us about this important topic. And let's take a quick ad break. You're on Morning Live. There's still so much more to come. Don't go away.